Kankin, Reading Sutras by Eihei Dogen. From Shobogenzo, the treasury of the true Dharma I. The practice and experience of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi sometimes relies on good counselors, and sometimes relies on the sutras. Good counselors means Buddhist patriarchs who are totally themselves. Sutras means sutras which are totally themselves. Because the self is totally a Buddhist patriarch, and because the self is totally a sutra, it is like this. Even though we call it self, it is not restricted by me and you. It is vivid eyes and a vivid fist. At the same time, there is the consideration of sutras, the reading of sutras, the reciting of sutras, the copying of sutras, the receiving of sutras, and the retaining of sutras. They are all the practice and experience of Buddhist patriarchs. Yet it is not easy to meet the Buddha's sutras. Through innumerable realms, even the name cannot be heard. Among Buddhist patriarchs, even the name cannot be heard. Amidst the lifeblood, even the name cannot be heard. Unless we are Buddhist patriarchs, we do not see, hear, read, recite, or understand the meaning of sutras. After learning in practice as Buddhist patriarchs, we are barely able to learn sutras in practice. At this time, the reality of hearing sutras, retaining sutras, receiving sutras, preaching sutras, and so on, exists in the ears, eyes, tongue, nose, and organs of body and mind, and in the places where we go, hear, and speak. The sort who, because they seek fame, preach non-Buddhist doctrines, cannot practice the Buddha's sutras. The reason is that the sutras are transmitted and retained on trees and on rocks, are spread through fields and through villages, are expounded by lands of dust, and are lectured by space. Great Master Kodo, the ancestral patriarch of Yakusan Mountain, has not ascended his seat in the Dharma Hall for a long time. The temple chief says, "The monks have long been hoping for your compassionate instruction, Master." Yakusan says, "Strike the bell." The temple chief strikes the bell, and a few of the monks assemble. Yakusan ascends the seat in the Dharma Hall and passes a while. Then he gets down from the seat and goes back to the abbot's quarters. The temple chief follows behind him and says, "Just before, the master agreed to preach the Dharma for the monks. Why have you not bestowed a single word upon us? Yakusan says, for sutras there are sutra teachers. For commentaries there are commentary teachers. How could you doubt the old monk? The compassionate instruction of the ancestral patriarch is that for fists there is a fist teacher, and for eyes there is an eye teacher. At the same time, with due respect, I would now like to ask the ancestral patriarch this. I do not deny your words. How can the old monk be doubted? But I still do not understand. The master is a teacher of what? The order of the founding patriarch Daikan is on Soke-zan Mountain in Shoshu District. Hotatsu, a monk who recites the Sutra of the Flower of Dharma, comes to practice there. The founding patriarch preaches for Hotatsu the following verse. When the mind is in delusion, the flower of Dharma turns. When the mind is in realization, we turn the flower of Dharma. Unless we are clear about ourselves, however long we recite the sutra, it will become an enemy because of its meanings. Without intention, the mind is right. With intention, the mind becomes wrong. When we transcend both with and without, we ride eternally in the white ox cart. So, when the mind is in delusion, we are turned by the flower of Dharma. When the mind is in realization, we turn the flower of Dharma. Further, when we spring free from delusion and realization, the flower of Dharma turns the flower of Dharma. On hearing this verse, Hotatsu jumps for joy and praises it with the following verse. 3,000 recitations of the sutra, with one phrase from Soke forgotten, before clarifying the import of the Buddha's appearance in the world. How can we stop recurring lives of madness? The sutra explains goat, deer, and ox as an expedient, but proclaims that beginning, middle, and end are good. Who knows that even within the burning house, originally we are kings in the Dharma? Then the founding patriarch says, from now on you will rightly be called the sutra reading monk. We should know that there are sutra reading monks in Buddhism. It is the direct teaching of the eternal Buddha of Soke. Reading in this phrase, sutra reading monk, is beyond having ideas, being without ideas, and so on. It is transcendence of both having and being without. The fact is only that from kalpa to kalpa, the hands never put down the sutra, and from noon to night, there is no time when it is not being read. The fact is only that from sutra to sutra, it is never not being experienced. The 27th Patriarch is the Venerable Prajnatara of Eastern India. A king of Eastern India, the story goes, invites the Venerable One to a midday meal, at which time the king asks, "Everyone else recites sutras. Why is it, Venerable One, that you alone do not recite?" The Patriarch says, "My out-breath does not follow circumstances. The in-breath does not reside in the world of aggregates. I am constantly reciting sutras like this, 100,000 myriad kotis of scrolls, never only one scroll or two scrolls." The Venerable Prajnatara is a native of an eastern territory of India. He is the 27th rightful successor from the Venerable Mahakasyapa, having received the authentic transmission of all the tools of the Buddha's house. He has dwelt in and retained the brains, the eyes, the fist and the nostrils, the staff, the patra, the robe and dharma, the bones and marrow, and so on. He is our ancestral patriarch, and we are his distant descendants. The words into which the Venerable One has now put his total effort mean not only that the out-breath does not follow circumstances, but also that circumstances do not follow the out-breath. Circumstances may be the brains and eyes. Circumstances may be the whole body. Circumstances may be the whole mind. But in bringing here, taking there, and bringing back here again, the state is just not following circumstances. Not following means totally following. Therefore, it is a state of bustling and jostling. The out-breath is circumstances themselves. Even so, it does not follow circumstances. For countless kalpas, we have never recognized the situation of breathing out and breathing in. But just now, the moment has come when we can recognize it for the first time. And so we hear it does not reside in the world of aggregates, and it does not follow circumstances. This is the moment when circumstances research for the first time such things as the in-breath. This moment has never been before, and it will never be again. It exists only in the present. The world of aggregates means the 5 aggregates: matter, perception, thought, inaction, and consciousness. The reason he does not reside in the 5 aggregates is that he is in the world where 5 aggregates have never arrived. Because he has grasped this pivotal point, the sutras he recites are never only 1 or 2 scrolls. He is constantly reciting 100,000 myriad kotis of scrolls. Though we say that 100,000 myriad kotis of scrolls just cites for the present an example of a large number. It is beyond only numerical quantity. It assigns the quantity of 100,000 myriad kotis of scrolls to one's outbreaths not residing in the world of aggregates. At the same time, the state is not measured by tainted or faultless wisdom, and it is beyond the world of tainted and faultless dharmas. Thus, it is beyond the calculation of wise intelligence. It is beyond the estimation of intelligent wisdom. It is beyond the consideration of non-wise intelligence. And it is beyond the reach of non-intelligent wisdom. It is the practice and experience of Buddhas and of patriarchs. It is their skin, flesh, bones, and marrow, their eyes, fists, brains, and nostrils, and their staffs and whisks springing out of the moment. Great Master Shinsai of Kannon-in Temple in Joshu, the story goes, is sent a donation by an old woman who asks the Great Master to recite the whole of the sutras. The Master descends from the Zazen chair, goes around it once, and says to the messenger, "I have finished reciting the sutras." The messenger returns and reports this to the old woman. The old woman says, "I asked him before to recite the whole of the sutras. Why did the Master only recite half the sutras?" Evidently, the recitation of the whole of the sutras or half of the sutras amounts to 3 scrolls of sutras in the old woman's case. "I have finished reciting the sutras" is the whole of Joshu's sutra. In brief, the situation of his reciting the whole of the sutras is as follows. There is Joshu going around the Zazen chair. There is the Zazen chair going around Joshu. There is Joshu going around Joshu. And there is the Zazen chair going around the Zazen chair. At the same time, all instances of reciting the sutras are neither limited to going around a Zazen chair, nor limited to a Zazen chair going around. Great Master Shinsho of Daisuizan Mountain in Ekishu, whose original Dharma name was Hoshin, succeeded Zen Master Dai-an of Chokeiji Temple. In the story, an old woman sends a donation and asks the master to recite the whole of the sutras. The master descends from his zazen chair, goes around it once, and says to the messenger, "I have already recited the whole of the sutras." The messenger returns and reports this to the old woman. The old woman says, "I asked him before to recite the whole of the sutras. Why did the master only recite half the sutras?" Now, do not study that Daisui is going round the Zazen chair, and do not study that the Zazen chair is going around Daisui. It is not only a grouping together of fists and eyes. His making of a circle is enaction of a circle. Does the old woman have the eyes, or does she not have the eyes to see it? Even though she has got the expression, he only recited half the sutras in the authentic transmission from a fist. The old woman should also say, "I asked him before to recite the whole of the sutras. Why did the master only worry his soul?" If she spoke like this, even by accident, she would be an old woman with eyes. In the order of the founding patriarch, Great Master Tozan Gohon, the story goes, there is a government official who prepares the midday meal, offers a donation, and requests the master to read and recite the whole of the sutras. The great master descends from his zazen chair and bows to the official. The official bows to the great master, who leads the official once around the zazen chair, then bows to the official again. After a while, he says to the official, "Do you understand?" The official says, "I do not understand." The great master says, "You and I have read and recited the whole of the sutras. How could you not understand?" That you and I have read and recited the whole of the sutras is evident. We do not learn that to go around the zazen chair is to read and recite the whole of the sutras, and we do not understand that to read and recite the whole of the sutras is to go around the zazen chair. All the same, we should listen to the compassionate instruction of the founding patriarch. My late master, the eternal Buddha, quoted this story when, while he was residing as master on Tendozan Mountain, a donor from Korea entered the mountain, made a donation for the monks to read the sutras, and requested that my late master should ascend the lecture seat. When he had quoted the story, my late master made a big circle with his whisk and said, "Tendo today has read and recited for you the whole of the sutras." Then he threw down the whisk and descended from the seat. We should read and recite now the words spoken by the late master, never comparing them to the words of others. Still, should we think that Master Tendo, in reading and reciting the whole of the sutras, uses a whole eye or uses half an eye? Do the words of the founding patriarch and the words of my late master rely on eyes or rely on tongues? How many eyes and tongues have they used? See if you can get to the bottom of it. The ancestral patriarch, Great Master Kodo of Yakusan Mountain, does not usually let people read sutras. One day, he is reading a sutra himself. A monk asks him, "The master does not usually let others read sutras. Why then are you reading yourself?" The master says, "I just need to shade my eyes." The monk says, "May I copy the master?" The master says, "If you were to read, you would surely pierce holes, even in ox hide." The words, "I just need to shade my eyes," spoken now, are words naturally spoken by shaded eyes themselves. Shading the eyes describes getting rid of eyes and getting rid of sutras. It describes complete eye shading and completely shaded eyes. Shading the eyes means opening the eyes in the shaded state, invigorating the eyes within shade, invigorating shade within eyes, adding an extra eyelid, utilizing the eyes within shade, and eyes themselves utilizing shade. This being so, the virtue of shading the eyes is never mentioned in any sutras other than eye sutras. You would surely pierce holes even in ox hide, describes complete ox hide and a complete hide ox. It describes utilizing the ox to become a hide. This is why possession of the skin, flesh, bones and marrow, and horns on the head and nostrils has been seen as the vigorous activity of bulls and cows. In copying the master, the ox becomes the eye. This is described as shading the eyes. It is the eye becoming the ox. Zen master Yafu Dosen says, "To serve offerings to Buddhas 100,000,000 thousands of times is boundless happiness. But how can it compare to everyday reading of the old teachings? On the face of white paper, characters are written in black ink. Open your eyes, I beg you, and look before you." Remember, serving offerings to olden Buddhas and reading the old teachings may be equal in happiness and good fortune, and may go beyond happiness and good fortune. The old teachings means characters written in black ink on white paper, but who can recognize the old teachings as such? We must master just this principle. In the order of Great Master Kokaku of Ungozan Mountain, the story goes, there is a monk who is reading a sutra in his quarters. The Great Master asks from outside the window, "Acharya, what sutra is it that you are reading?" The monk replies, "The Vimalakirti Sutra." The Master says, "I am not asking you if it is the Vimalakirti Sutra. That which you are reading is a what sutra?" At this, the monk is able to enter. The Great Master's words, "That which you are reading is a what sutra," mean that the state of reading in one line is age-old, profound, and eternal, and it is not desirable to represent it as reading. On the road we meet deadly snakes. This is why the question, "What sutra?" has been realized. In meeting as human beings, we do not misrepresent anything. This is why the monk replies, "The Vimalakirti Sutra." In sum, reading sutras mean reading sutras with eyes, into which we have drawn together all the Buddhist patriarchs. At just this moment, the Buddhist patriarchs instantly become Buddha, preach Dharma, preach Buddha, and do Buddha action. Without this moment in reading sutras, the brains and faces of Buddhist patriarchs could never exist. At present, in the orders of Buddhist patriarchs, forms for the reading of sutras are many and varied. For when a donor enters the mountain and requests the whole Sangha to read sutras, for when the monks have been requested to read sutras regularly, for when the monks read the sutras of their own volition, and so on. Besides these, There is the sutra reading by the whole Sangha for a deceased monk. When a donor enters the mountain and requests the monks to read sutras, from breakfast on the day of the reading, the hall chief hangs an advance notice of the sutra reading in front of the monks' hall and in all quarters. After breakfast, the prostration mat is laid before the image of the sacred monk. When it is time for the reading, the bell in front of the monks' hall is struck 3 times, or struck once, according to the instructions of the abbot. After the sound of the bell, the head monk and all the monks put on the kashaya and enter the cloud hall. They go to their own place and sit facing forward. Then the abbot enters the hall, goes before the sacred monk, bows with joined hands, burns incense, and then sits at the abbot's place. Next, the child helpers are told to distribute the sutras. These sutras are arranged beforehand in the kitchen hall, placed in order and made ready to be given out when the time comes. The sutras are either distributed from inside the sutra box or placed on a tray and then distributed. Once the monks have requested a sutra, they open and read it immediately. During this time, at the right moment, the guest supervisor leads the donor into the cloud hall. The donor picks up a handheld censer just in front of the cloud hall and enters the hall holding it up with both hands. The handheld censer is kept in the common area by the entrance to the kitchen hall. It is prepared with incense in advance, and a helper is instructed to keep it ready in front of the cloud hall. When the donor is about to enter the hall, the helper, upon instruction, hands the censer to the donor. The guest supervisor gives the orders regarding the censer. When they enter the hall, the guest supervisor leads and the donor follows, and they enter through the southern side of the front entrance to the cloud hall. The donor goes before the sacred monk, burns a stick of incense, and does 3 prostrations, holding the censer while doing the prostrations. During the prostrations, the guest supervisor, hands folded, stands to the north of the prostration mat, facing south, but turns slightly towards the donor. After the donor's prostrations, the donor turns to the right, goes to the abbot, and salutes the abbot with a deep bow, holding the censer up high with both hands. The abbot remains on the chair to receive the salutation, holding up a sutra with palms held together. The donor then bows to the north. Having bowed, the donor begins the round of the hall from in front of the head monk. During the walk around the hall, the donor is led by the guest supervisor. Having done one round of the hall and arrived again in front of the sacred monk, the donor faces the sacred monk once more and bows, holding up the censer with both hands. At this time, the guest supervisor is just inside the entrance to the cloud hall, standing with hands folded to the south of the prostration mat and facing north. After saluting the sacred monk, the donor, following the guest supervisor, goes out to the front of the cloud hall, does one circuit of the front hall, goes back inside the cloud hall proper, and performs 3 prostrations to the sacred monk. After the prostrations, the donor sits on a folding chair to witness the sutra reading. The folding chair is set facing south, near the pillar to the sacred monk's left. Or it may be set facing north, near the southern pillar. When the donor is seated, the guest supervisor should turn to salute the donor, and then go to his or her own place. Sometimes we have a Sanskrit chorus while the donor is walking around the hall. The place for the Sanskrit chorus is either on the sacred monk's right or the sacred monk's left, according to convenience. In the handheld censer, we insert and burn valuable incense, like ginkgo or sanko. This incense is supplied by the donor. While the donor is walking around the hall, the monks join palms. Next is the distribution of donations for the sutra reading. The size of the donation is at the discretion of the donor. Sometimes things such as cotton cloth or fans are distributed. The donor personally may give them out, or the main officers may give them out, or helpers may give them out. The method of distribution is as follows. The donation is placed in front of each monk, not put into the monk's hands. The monks each join hands to receive the donation as it is given out in front of them. Donations are sometimes distributed at the midday meal on the day of the sutra reading. If donations are to be distributed at lunchtime, the head monk, after offering the meal, strikes down the clapper once again. And then the head monk gives out the donations. The donor will have written on a sheet of paper the aim to which the sutra reading is to be directed, and this paper is pasted to the pillar on the sacred monk's right. When reading sutras in the Cloud Hall, we do not read them out in a loud voice. We read them in a low voice. Or sometimes we open a sutra and only look at the characters, not reading them out in phrases, but just reading the sutra silently. There are hundreds or thousands of scrolls provided in the common store for this kind of sutra reading, mostly of the Diamond Prajna Sutra, the Universal Gate chapter, and the Peaceful and Joyful Practice chapter of the Lotus Sutra, the Golden Light Sutra, and so on. Each monk goes through one scroll. When the sutra reading is finished, the child helpers pass in front of the monk's seats, carrying the original tray or box, and the monks each deposit a sutra. Both when taking the sutra and when replacing it, we join hands. When taking, first we join hands and then we take. When replacing, first we deposit the sutra, then we join hands. After that, each person palms together, makes the dedication in a low voice. For sutra readings in the common area, the chief officer or the prior burns incense, does prostrations, goes around the hall and gives out the donations, all in the same way as a donor, and holds up the censer also in the same way as a donor. If one of the monks becomes a donor and requests a sutra reading by the whole of the Sangha, it is the same as for a lay donor. There is burning of incense, prostrations, going around the hall, distribution of donations, and so on. The guest supervisor leads, as in the case of a lay donor. There is a custom of reading sutras for the emperor's birthday. So if the celebration of the birthday of the reigning emperor is on the 15th day of the first lunar month, the sutra readings for the emperor's birthday begin on the 15th day of the 12th lunar month. On this day, there is no formal preaching in the Dharma hall. 2 rows of platforms are laid out in front of the image of Shakyamuni Buddha in the Buddha hall. That is to say, the rows are laid out facing each other, east and west, each running from south to north. Desks are stood in front of the east row and the west row, and on them are placed the sutras: the Diamond Prajna Sutra, the Benevolent King Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, the Supreme King Sutra, the Golden Light Sutra, and so on. Several monks each day are invited from among the monks in the Zazen hall to partake in refreshments before the midday meal. Sometimes a bowl of noodles and a cup of soup are served to each monk, or sometimes 6 or 7 dumplings with a portion of soup are served to each monk. The dumplings also are served in a bowl, but in this case chopsticks are provided. Spoons are not provided. We do not change seats to eat, but remain at our seat for the sutra reading. The refreshments are placed on the desk that the sutras are placed on. There is no need to bring another table. While refreshments are being eaten, the sutras are left on the desk. After finishing the refreshments, each monk rises from his or her seat to go and rinse the mouth, then returns to the seat and resumes sutra reading immediately. Sutra reading continues from after breakfast until the time of the midday meal. When the lunchtime drum sounds 3 times, we rise from our seats. The day's sutra reading is limited to before the midday meal. From the first day, a board saying established as a practice place for celebration of the Emperor's birthday is hung in front of the Buddha hall, under the eastern eaves. The board is yellow. In addition, notice of celebration of the Emperor's birthday is written on a shoji placard, which is then hung on the eastern front pillar inside the Buddha hall. This placard is also yellow. The name of the abbot is written on red paper or white paper. The 2 characters of the name are written on a small sheet of paper, which is pasted onto the front of the placard beneath the date. The sutra reading continues as outlined until the day of the imperial descent and birth, when the abbot gives formal preaching in the Dharma hall and congratulates the emperor. This is an old convention which is not obsolete even today. There is another case in which monks decide of their own accord to read sutras. Temples traditionally have a common sutra reading hall. Monks go to this hall to read sutras. The rules for its use are as in our present pure criteria. The founding patriarch, Great Master Kodo of Yakusan Mountain, asked Shramanera Ko, "Did you get it by reading sutras, or did you get it by requesting the benefit of the teaching. Shramanera Ko says, I did not get it by reading sutras, and I did not get it by requesting benefit. The Master says, there are a lot of people who do not read sutras and who do not request benefit. Why do they not get it? Shramanera Ko says, I do not say that they are without it. It is just that they dare not experience it directly. In the house of the Buddhist patriarchs, some experience it directly, and some do not experience it directly. But reading sutras and requesting the benefit of the teaching are the common tools of everyday life. Preach to the assembly at Kosho Horinji Temple in the Uji district of Yoshu on the 15th day of the 9th lunar month in the autumn of the 2nd year of Ninji.